I'm going to interrupt you, man, because I love that opening. I love it. It's amazing.
All right, that music is custom made. I paid someone to record that. All right, folks. Hey, welcome to the Financial Sandbox. Finance can be messy, but don't worry. We clean it up with facts, fun, and as you can see, a little bit of sarcasm. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for real financial talk in the sandbox, which is pretty regular. Today, my guest is Tony Rishell. He is a CCIM and a CPM, and he claims to be a real estate wealth strategist. So I'm going to let you explain all three of those.
Absolutely.
First, what's a CCIM?
Yeah, CCIM stands for Certified Commercial Investment Member, or well, not really manager, member. It's a part of the National CCIM Institute. It's a education, like premier education program for commercial real estate professionals. Everything from brokers, appraisers, wealth professionals, asset managers can participate. There are education chapters throughout the country, actually internationally. And there's a lot of great work. One way of looking at it is you look at discounted cash flow analysis and you learn how to negotiate. So it's kind of like an MBA, but less time and less money.
Yes. I'm in the middle of mine. I'm a candidate and hope to finish mine up this year. So we're going to skip the CPM, but what do you call yourself a real estate wealth strategist, and you help families and investors and family trusts and family offices. What's that mean?
Yeah, so a wealth strategist, there isn't a license for a wealth strategist. Financial advisor, yes. Wealth strategists are people who come into a family arena and help to strategize the multi-generational transfer of wealth. Sometimes it's multi-generational in the aspect of like kids, grandkids, etc. Sometimes it's the wealth strategy is looking at an account mix and then deciding how to appropriately allocate assets in that mix. And it's sort of a broader kind of look. In many ways, wealth strategists are relationship managers. They come into a relationship and they're the ones who bring in a financial advisor, investment strategist, someone who might be doing, real estate professional if it's a real estate family, and attorney, CPA, et cetera, and coordinate them. My focus is on real estate families and real estate wealth. And I call myself a real estate wealth strategist, mostly because I feel like the real estate family is a subset of wealth itself. And I just love that family. I came from a family that was wealthy in real estate, know the dynamics very well, lived through them, and believe that I've been called to serve those specific families. So real estate wealth strategist is what I call myself.
So you just mentioned, that was my next question. You come from, you're from Oakland, right? Your family's from Oakland, and you guys have a long history on real estate investing and a portfolio there, but you also left, right? And went to Wells Fargo and had another life and came back to it, right? Tell me about that.
The short story is that we were, my mom had married a couple of times, had divorced, and we were living with my grandmother in a mobile home in Concord, and my mom started dating a guy, and turns out they hit it off really well, ended up getting married. Next thing I know, I'm a part of a family that owns a few blocks of Oakland and a pretty robust print operation making like wine labels and stickers. And so at 17, I was rolling up stickers over my summers. And then when I graduated at 17 from high school, I was a property manager assistant, and I worked 30 hours as a property management assistant while going to St. Mary's College and getting my degree in philosophy.
All right, to my audience, you'll notice that we spliced in and out here really quick. Tony had some Wi-Fi difficulty, and I don't know if it was Verizon or the hotel or the Wi-Fi he was on. So the shared space, who knows? But we fixed it. you were talking. I'm going to summarize that your mom married well, and you started managing working in the family office, but you wanted to. It sounds like you wanted to get out into the world and learn a little bit from on your own experience. You were at Wells Fargo Bank and some other places.
Yeah. So spent some time with the family doing both the labels and the real estate. And then in around 2011, 2012, as my step-grandfather was growing ill, began to move into more of the estate planning side of things with the family. So it was a rather sophisticated estate plan. In 2012, we had the fiscal cliff concern about taking the estate tax lifetime exclusions from 4 million per individual down to 1. And so there was a lot of estate work being done at the time. And so then I joined CCIM. I started getting my education. The city of Oakland specified our properties and the Valdez Triangle as the most important property along the Broadway Valdez specific plan for development. And I got to work with a number of large developers to analyze property, work on the specific plan, go through the EIR process, negotiate those development contracts, and had a great time doing it. But then, you kind of want to go and see how it is with other families. My family had some what we call dynamics in the industry around what to do with as we were selling property. And there was a range in the ages of my stepfather's generation. A large range. And so the older, members were like, hey, I want to go into a risk averse. I want to go into a low risk investment or sell and pay the tax. There we go. Younger, maybe we 1031 into something that's a little more aggressive and keep this thing going. So that was exciting to me to step in and do what I could to participate in those conversations, maybe tamper down some of the emotion if I could. When I left the family and went to Wells Fargo. Oh, it's always good, And so I went to Wells Fargo and had an opportunity to work with many families that all have a different range of dynamics. I got to see the family with the $10-20 million and those with the $5 billion and see how they actually worked with one another. What's amazing is across the socioeconomic spectrum, human beings are human beings, and so you'll have one brother upset with another brother for getting the baseball that he didn't get, or he got the Dr. Pepper and I didn't, and it's you could buy Dr. Pepper. Why are you arguing over this? So that was really fun for me to really kind of dig into that. My first year at Wells, I won an award being it's called a Top Resolution Award for 2019 because I had clients that bankers didn't want to deal with. I got to deal with them. I got to at least calm them down a little bit, which helped with like estate settlement and trust administration. It was great.
Right. Yeah, when you're dealing with family dynamics, it's always. I've always worked with families selling real estate. Sometimes they might be heirs, and I worked with a family a couple of years ago. There were 5 heirs, and I said to them, "I'm going to work with 2 of you. Mm-hmm. So you guys need to sit down and figure out which 2 we're going to work with and which 2 are going to sign all the documents, because the other 3, you guys are all going to agree that these 2 people are going to be the deciders."
It's prudent, right? It's prudent to do that.
It created this real opportunity to get them to really sort of put some of the family stuff aside and get to the business. So let me ask you, when we've been talking about different family dynamics and 1031 exchange, how do you evaluate the framework for liquidity planning? I mean, especially when real estate is the major concentration.
Yeah, sure. So, when you have a corporate trustee like Wells Fargo that comes in and takes over and is running the administration of an estate or beyond, if it's like a multi-generational plan, there are requirements by the OCC and FDIC to bring down real estate concentration, and so to like a 20% band, right? Like get it way down. But the families that that us in the real estate world deal with, they're they make their living on 80-90% concentration in real estate. It's like the print family who, like, we had labels and we did label work. Well, everything was the label business. And that's one business, let alone one industry to be a part of or invested in. And so with real estate, it's kind of a shock to enter into the corporate trust world and realize, they want you to take that asset mix and reduce it down. So with that in mind, the liquidity question that you just asked is so important, as is the ownership context, right? If you're in or targeting a corporate trust structure over time, being able to solve that unit, that asset mix early and start to liquidate real estate or recategorize real estate in a different way starts to make some, supposed to be helpful if you're like preparing for an estate event. If you find that you're an active real estate family or an active real estate company or portfolio, having enough liquidity for just operations like CapEx and TIs and that sort of thing, you plan for that. Have a war chest. Liquidity for a war chest is helpful to continue to grow or strengthen your portfolio. So how you use the cash really does matter.
With that, you've got a lot of different entities there. You've got attorneys, you've got a CPA, you got a trust and estate counsel, you got property managers. Where do you draw the line between family office work versus the roles of all of those other persons? How do you herd the kittens?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to preface it by saying that there is a stratification in terms of like family businesses. You have the businesses, you have enterprise, and you have office, right? And by the time you hit the family office level, the family office has personnel taking care of not just the work of the business or businesses, but also car insurance and cell phones and utility bills and everything else for the individuals. So there's kind of a gradation, and so how the attorneys and CPAs engage at one level, at the family office level, might be a little different than at just the enterprise level. So at the enterprise, you might have multiple businesses. The main business people have kind of stepped out. Now they're investing in multiple enterprises. And so in a real estate family, that might look like having different single purpose entities holding real estate. It might mean also having other types of business, like a parking business, a property management business. You funnel businesses. There's one operator in the Diablo Valley who started, property management, realized he could also have HVAC work and also do, landscaping, creates a funnel of all these businesses. And then of course has investors participating. That's an enterprise, right? That's a whole. So when it comes to working with the professionals, like someone like you, where you're a 1031 expert in many ways, knowing kind of what the strategies are and what could be the strategies start to matter, right? Okay, not just transactionally, but what am I going to do? How am I going to stagger, or my favorite word, sequence? How am I going to sequence transactions to like amplify what I'm trying to accomplish as a family? And that's where having, different, attorney, who you work with as an attorney matters. If you're working with a single office, like boutique firm, they may only focus on estate planning and not be able to deal with entity formation transactions, real estate transactions. So sometimes it's really helpful to be a part of a larger firm where there's already a nexus on those expertises. And then, of course, you bring in your CPA, a tax strategist as well. There are CPA firms that aren't just like with some law firms where they have a focus on, maybe it's, they have tax strategy, they have compliance. There's a firm that has I think Sensiba is a firm that has like environmental, regulation control and concerns. And so you can find the more sophisticated you are, the more sophisticated your team starts to become.
So when you're talking about like a most common estate plan versus real estate reality mismatches, and this is kind of where you're really going here. One of the questions I had was, when you see these entity structures, right? You've got an outdated trust, you've got a fractional ownership mess somewhere. How do you work to manage those and to sort of untangle the yarn, so to speak?
Yeah. So I'm dealing with a client right now where we started working maybe about 18 months ago. So keep in mind it takes time to have these conversations, right? The trust, the going through rewriting the trust work, because the value of their real estate began to exceed 25 to $30 million. They're knocking on the door of the new lifetime exclusion. Maybe it'll continue growing. So, a certain kind of trust that they had in place before, moving into like an A/B trust now, allows them to create a credit shelter trust when the first death passes, and kind of control like what would happen with real estate and its allocation over time. So reading the trust, working with an estate planning attorney that's sophisticated enough to understand what's going on, that's the first step, because that's who owns the LP or LLC interests in any kind of holding company. And then, like you said, in terms of the
so let me step you back just a second here, because you talked about the different levels of trust. You talked about 25 million, and then there's another level. Talk about those levels, because my audience may not understand that, right? And as we do this, sometimes we get we get into our acronyms, right? LP, limited partnership, the LLC, so on and so forth. So when you hear yourself doing an acronym, spell it out for us at the same time. But let's get back to the different levels.
So in the estate planning world, and remember, I'm not an attorney, so although all the the caveats are taken here, but disclaimers. But here's the thing: is with the OBBBA and Trump's new regime, we've got a 15 million per individual lifetime exclusion, and what that means is, in passing on an asset valuation of $15 million is protected from the 40% estate tax. If you have a spouse and you're married, filing jointly, you got 2 times that. So you've got $30 million to work with. There are structures that you can employ legally where, if one person passes away, the other person kind of picks up their exclusion amounts. And so you kind of, you're working with the 30 million as a married couple, if it's 15 for an individual. And if it's below that, you don't have estate tax to deal with. If it's above it, you do, right? And there's income tax, there's capital gains tax, there's estate tax. And so that 30 million is kind of like our new cutoff, and it'll increase every year with with the CPI. So when you're a family of wealth, or you're an investor with wealth, and you're working through a plan like this, there are strategies to move the wealth down to the next generation without it facing that 40% tax. Strategies like annual gifting is a really easy one to kind of move money down to a number of people. There are, through the trusts, you kind of exclude some and move some into others. You have a generation skipping transfer exclusion that you can work with all of this. Trying to keep it simple and not get too complicated. Ultimately,
oh no, you're going exactly where I want you to go, to be honest, because because my next question to you is really, how do you approach succession with senior family members who want to control, but the next generation wants optionality, or different asset preference, right? How do you approach that when you're dealing with multiple generations?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because millennials have one thought pattern, and you've got Gen Z, right? You've got baby boomers, Gen X, millennials. Everybody has a different agenda.
Yeah. So the great thing about holding real estate in an entity is that it's really easy to break up that entity in terms of like LLC interests or limited partner interests, And so a lot of sophisticated families will hold real estate in, let's say, a limited partner or a family limited partnership entity. And then over time, year by year, they'll value the property in the entity and then gift a percentage to the kids. And so, give it 10 years and now 10, 20, 30, 40% of the entity that holds the real estate is now in somebody else's hands down the generations. Why that's so awesome,
right,
is because when you're appraising the real estate, it has a value. But when you're appraising the fractional ownership of the real estate, Well, if the document controls who gets to buy that, and the document controls okay, so my mind is kind of buzzing a little bit here. What happens is you get discounts for those fractional interests, right? Because you don't have control as a fractional interest holder. You can't market that fractional interest. So when 1% moves down, let's say it's $1 million property, you're moving down $10,000 as 1%. Well, that $10,000 is it's not really $10,000 moving down because you discount it. You can't really sell that interest. So it might move down at a value of like $7,000, maybe $7,500. So imagine you have a $100 million estate and you want to kind of get that down to the next generation. Well, it's better to get a discounted interest down. So you can use these. The challenge, of course, with using this is the control, right? Am I just going to give it all away? So what families do is they'll create an investment company or a control company that would be the general partner for this limited partnership. And it might hold 1% of the controlling general partner interest, and the other 99% is kind of fair game. But there's something you got to watch out for. What you got to watch out for is reassessment. Yeah. The reassessment happens is assessors are tracking the beneficial interest of who holds an entity. And so as somebody begins to gift down to, say, 3 kids, well, each of those 3 kids, their beneficial interest grows and grows and grows. And you're supposed to report to the assessor when that interest exceeds 50% of the ownership of the real estate, because then the kids now have more interest than the parents. Well, when that happens, you're supposed to be reassessed. And so you've got to be very careful about how you're gifting, how much you're gifting, and those allocations too.
So this is so interesting, right? And the nice thing is captioning will happen at the bottom of the screen. So some of the words that we've missed will be in a caption. So we do have a little bit of technical difficulties here, but that's okay because most of it's all getting through. When it comes to this role that you're in, what are entry roles? I mean, look, there's a lot of people out there who find this interesting. They're looking at, especially people who are getting out of college, or people who are in a variety of investment portfolio management roles. What's the path? Because you didn't take a straight path here. I mean, bachelor's in philosophy at St. Mary's, right?
That's a great question, and how I will answer this is that there's 2 ways. The way I went was through the real estate asset manager role, where I got fortunate enough to be employed by a trust company. I knew trusts really well from living kind of through the administration of one with my family, and I knew real estate really well. So coming from that angle gave me the opportunity through asset management to dive into the family question. I think a more traditional path is to work with an investment company where you grow in acquisitions and then maybe become a real estate asset manager that way, or from property management to asset management. And then you kind of come into the question more from the real estate acumen side than from like a family side, which is the way I came in. And then of course there's the wealth advisor side, the wealth advisor, financial advisor, financial planner side, where you want to be a planner and you come in from that angle, and now you're helping families kind of plan through, and you might just have a love of real estate that kind of guides the conversation. And the very last angle I can think of is like if you're an estate planning attorney. And so if you're an estate planning attorney, you might come in and say, hey, you know what, I love the strategy part. I don't like drafting the documents as much as I like actually just strategizing. And so a number of wealth strategists at trust companies and banks in the Bay Area were estate planning attorneys or fiduciary advisors that then take on the wealth strategist role. There's a few paths.
Right. What skills do you think are most undervalued? But maybe decisive skills, but is it discretion? Is it writing skills? Is it conflict management?
No, I'll tell you exactly what it is. I'll tell you exactly what it is. So it's 2 things. Number 1 is diplomacy. So the ability to mediate and be diplomatic in the President Obama, amazing diplomat, good speaker, mediator, right? Oprah, also
Right.
great speaker, diplomat. Both have a kind of a protagonist personality. Politics aside, they know what is good. They go after what they believe is good, and they're willing to work with people to do it. That's number one. Number two is
Right.
actually being smart enough to apply your discounted cash flow analysis beyond just the capital gains question. Because I know that in the 1031 world, you're thinking, okay, how do I save these taxes? Everyone thinks, how do I save on taxes? Well, what all I did was add a tab to my DCF, to my discounted cash flow calculator. I said, okay, well, let me take these considerations of income and capital gains tax, and now let me add a tab that says, well, what are the estate tax implications of every decision I make? So what that means is I have to know the entities, I know the owners, I have to work with the CPA, the certified public accountant, the accountant, to understand basis a little bit, or just you make some assumptions. And then when you're making decisions on whether or not to trade real estate or what to acquire, what to dispose of, you see if there's an impact ultimately in terms of estate tax. And that, of course, is relative to how close the wealth generator or the older generation is to passing away. So you kind of think through some of that too.
Right. We're going to get into the 1031 exchange and some of the estate planning things in a minute, but I want to ask one question about what's the biggest culture shock for people moving into a family office or into a role like yours? And how do you succeed in this environment?
Yeah, the biggest culture shock, I think, is that in the corporate world, like at Wells Fargo, for example, with my experience, is there's a kind of assumed professionalism across the board and respect for everybody. But when you enter the family world, like again with that baseball glove that he got and I didn't, right? When you come into the family world, there's a different kind of baggage. And often that baggage shows up in the form of entitlement or just outright like laziness. It could show up in quick anger and frustration. And you find yourself if you're not a family member, you find yourself working in some ways on the living room floor of a family. Even if you're at an office or you're in a Class A building, it's the living room floor in many ways, and so I think every family has a culture. And so culture shock is going from, what could be a corporate, a cultural environment to a family that has its distinct culture. I've worked with a family that where coaching is a big part of how they do it. And so there's a lot of kind of that coaching mentality comes to play. That's great if you love sports. But if you like cats and plants, you might not like that high energy, So nothing against cat and plant people, by the way.
Yeah. Let's not make anybody angry. Yeah, I have to be reminded that so often my mom and I were very close, and a lot of times we would have dinner on a weekly, monthly, whatever. And she would ask me, "Were you a realtor this week, a financial advisor, or a therapist?" Right. That's our role a lot of times, right? Because we're trying to manage the family.
Yeah. Well, and what's the mark of a good therapist is one that just listens and asks good questions that draw information out of the people we're speaking with. There's a monk, his name is Thomas A. Kempis, and he wrote, one of his quotes says that we converse with one another to like ease our souls. And so if you turn that around, listening to somebody means you're helping them ease their soul. And I'd love to do that. I love to help somebody ease the pressure. What am I doing for their family at home? If I can ease some pressure, maybe I make it a little better at home for that day. I love it. I love what I get to do.
Yeah. I so hear that. All right, let's talk about legacy real estate. Let's talk about kind of when people start divesting. When a family's divesting legacy assets, what are the three questions you ask to decide whether a 1031 exchange is on the table, liquidity needs, basis, tax exposure, the time horizon, their appetite for property management at whatever stage in life they are, whether they are the senior people in the chain, or if it's the younger millennials and Gen Z. How do you approach that conversation when it comes to 1031 exchange?
Yeah, honestly, Herb, like there is to come into a meeting or a family asking the question, even a week before, it's like, it's almost not enough time. If you do, you get right to it. Okay, well, what you go right to the financial question. How much money are you going to save by doing a 1031 versus paying the tax? And then, of course, you're digging into all the details. If you have time, you start with the family constitution. What are the family values? What's the family mission? What's the goal of the wealth generator? What legacy is nothing. True legacy isn't the money handed on. It isn't the inheritance. True legacy is the imprint, the mark that's left upon the character of the next person or the next generation. In fact, the word character comes from the Greek transliteration of a coin, like impressed upon another coin. And so that impression. So legacy is impression, right? What are you giving? So in that vein, if I have the time to actually develop that with the family and understand it, then it's, well, what do you want to stay in real estate? Do you find value, habits and character that come from owning real estate? Then perhaps rolling into another real asset that may be a little different on the risk profile might be the best path. If it's, hey, I don't want to manage, but I want to continue to hold, I want to have a touch on real estate. Well, maybe rolling into something like you would provide with a DST is a vehicle that would work. If they're like, no, you know what, I need the liquidity.
And that DST from an acronym standpoint, Delaware Statutory Trust. So.
Yes, thanks, sir. Thank you.
Keeping up with our audience here.
No, but it's good because I know there are other groups that use the same acronym in a different way, but that's what I'm speaking to.
Right. Exactly.
And then it may be that long-term care is extremely expensive. If you have somebody who's heavy and they have to have two people with that person every hour of the day because he has to get up or she has to get up and walk around in the middle of the night, that's two individuals times 3 shifts. That's 6 people you have working, and then you pay them well in the Bay Area or in California, and all that's expensive. And it may mean that you have to sell and pay the tax just to capitalize the long-term care of the wealth generator. And in some ways, you guys say, well, isn't that why they generated the wealth? So there's a lot that goes into
and that's often a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's often a conversation we have with them about long-term care and life insurance and all of that. That comes into that process, because it's not just the cash available and the asset value, but how do you plan for long-term care? And there are options there. So how do you map that 1031 exchange decision in the family's big picture? Estate plan, liquidity planning for taxes, philanthropic goals.
Absolutely.
What's the governance that you've found in your experience?
Yeah. So what works is if you have enough time to figure out like where the family wants to go and everyone's on board, right? They all understand the plan. Then there's a repositioning that happens. Do we want to hold on to this block of real estate in Oakland, which is my story, indefinitely, where you have challenges like rent control and these 1920s housing stock, and you're not sure if the galvanized is going to keep holding up, and or do you sell it and exchange into something like a triple net QSR somewhere in the country that you're going to have for a little while. You're going to have a relationship with maybe a lease administrator, and then you go to the next one. And if you are savvy, what you do is you say, okay, I have some members of maybe generation 2 or 3 that have a lower risk profile, and so you figure, okay, I'll move my portfolio into less risky real estate assets, And you might have those that want a little more aggressive. They want to do a value add project, or maybe they want to get opportunistic and develop, 200 acres in Idaho. Well, now they're going to, you can trade into a more opportunistic sort of strategy. So just like you can do with a equities portfolio, you can do it with real estate because of the 1031 opportunities, right? That you can do. And it's just what, but then it's a liquidity. Maybe you also need to get a little liquidity to deal with some of the cash issues that are going to happen down the road. So you look at what you got, you look at what you know you probably can achieve, and because real estate moves a lot, the volatility is slower than equities and other securities. You can do some planning. You can do some planning, in my opinion. That's kind of why I like it. I like slow, I like to breathe, take a second.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm going to have you back on the show. For those of you who missed part of what he was talking about, what we missed in some of the technology was the condition of the real estate, right? If you're going to sell it, what maintenance issues do you have that family have before transitioning that real estate? Is the plumbing updated? Is the electrical updated? Is the roof? I mean, all of those things are part of that decision-making process. And I'm definitely going to have you on when we're in a different technology Wi-Fi environment, so that we get into this more clearly. But that's what some people missed in there. Let's go back to, I like to ask this question a lot. In your experience, what's the most common mistakes that families make trying to figure out a 1031 exchange highly appreciated asset, the timing, the debt, the replacement? I mean, a lot of times I talk to people and they say, oh gosh, we'll figure this out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you see as some of those common mistakes that families make?
Yeah, I think the number one mistake that I've seen is just like you said, I'm going to deal with that later. And it's like piss poor planning, I don't know. There's like a phraseology around, not planning well leads to poor performance, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's plan, be on top of it. Plan and then execute your plan. That's the biggest mistake that people make, is they don't plan well. Besides that, I think my personal feeling is that the idea, I just want to get away. I just want to step away. It puts them into if they decide to 1031 into a Delaware statutory trust item without the wisdom that you would bring, because you understand there are many people who will move owners into a DST or Delaware Statutory Trust product without actually going through the questions like you go through, right?
Yeah.
And what happens is they lose control, they lose control of timing, control of opportunity, and if you know what you're getting into, that's great. But if you just rush into it because you just want to be done, or you had a really nice steak dinner, that somebody sold you the idea on at a steak dinner, that's not the right move. And I want to put a plug in for asset management, because I think that a lot of what those companies provide, what sponsors provide, is an asset management function. And if you can find somebody that can do asset management services without giving up the ownership, you have time to plan. It doesn't have to be permanent. Just get a little time. Buy yourself some time. So, in my opinion, I think that's that rushing is the biggest issue when you rush.
Yeah.
I have an uncle, one of the wisest guys, and he says, I'm so sorry. He says, this is great. He says, if somebody tells you to hurry up, slow down. If somebody tells you to rush, stop. And he's really wise. He's really right.
So I like to take a minute and get personal here, right? You're a family man, but you're also overseeing families. I'm a big cartoon person, and if you had to pick a cartoon character that best represents you in your role in work, Who is it? What is
Ned
it? Tell me,
Flanders.
who's that cartoon?
I'm
I know,
Ned
I love it.
Flanders. I'm Ned Flanders.
You're Ned Flanders. I love Ned. Tell me why.
Well, when he takes off his shirt, he's ripped, and I'm not ripped, but you know, he's like, and he's patriotic, and he's a family man, and he's a man of values in a context where things get really crazy in that cartoon.
Yeah.
You know, and he's consistent, and I think that that's where I probably would find myself being Ned Flanders. in the cartoon world. But who are you? I want to know, who are you in the cartoon world, man?
It's not the interview about me. We'll get to that later. Most of the time, I feel like the Tasmanian devil, to be honest with you, because we're sitting around, you know, trying to get so many things done, and we're balancing all of those plates, right? So, the question is, do I just spin around the tree and cut it down, or? Well, folks, awesome. Hey, that's a wrap. We're going to end right there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more real financial talk in the sandbox.